Growing up with my two brothers, Jacob and Liam, life was always an adventure. Jacob, the eldest, was confident and charismatic, the kind of person who could light up any room he walked into. Liam, the middle child, was quieter, introspective, and had a protective streak that made him dependable. I was the youngest, often caught between their personalities, observing more than participating. Despite our differences, the three of us shared a bond so strong that I believed nothing could ever come between us. Our parents were often away for work, leaving us to fend for ourselves in our small countryside home. It was during these times that we created some of our best memories, playing games late into the night, sharing secrets, and talking about our dreams. Those moments felt sacred, a testament to the unshakable trust we had in each other. But as I would soon learn, even the strongest bonds can falter when emotions are involved. Amelia was a frequent visitor to our home, the daughter of a family friend. She was graceful, with an easy smile that seemed to brighten the dullest days. Her laughter was infectious, her kindness unmatched, and it was hard not to be drawn to her. She had a way of making everyone feel special, but in doing so, she unknowingly became the center of attention for all three of us. Jacob was the first to catch her attention, his natural charm making it seem effortless. He'd tease her, make her laugh, and find excuses to spend time with her. Liam, on the other hand, was more reserved. He didn't need words to make his feelings known. His gestures spoke volumes. He'd fix things around her house, help her carry heavy groceries, and offer quiet support whenever she needed it. And then there was me, always lingering in the background, unsure of how to express the quiet admiration I felt for her. At first, it felt harmless. Amelia was just a friend, someone we all enjoyed being around. But as time passed, I began to notice a shift. Jacob and Liam started vying for her attention in subtle ways, their friendly banter taking on a sharper edge. Jacob would interrupt conversations between Liam and Amelia, inserting himself with a joke or a story. Liam, in turn, would become more withdrawn, his frustration barely concealed. I tried to stay neutral, but it was impossible not to feel the growing tension. I could see how much they both cared for her, and it scared me. Our home, once filled with laughter and warmth, started to feel like a battlefield where words were weapons and glances carried hidden meanings. I told myself it was temporary, that things would go back to normal once Amelia left. But deep down, I knew we were heading towards something we couldn't come back from. The innocence of those early days began to fade, replaced by something heavier, something none of us knew how to handle. And as I watched my brothers drift further apart, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change forever. Jacob had a way of captivating anyone in the room, and with Amelia, it was no different. He'd lean against the kitchen counter, a playful smirk on his face, as he teased her about the smallest things, her favorite books, the way she always tucked her hair behind her ear. She'd laugh, shaking her head at his antics, and he'd flash a grin, clearly enjoying her reaction. To anyone watching, it might have seemed like a budding romance, but I knew my brothers too well to think it was that simple. Liam, though quieter, was no less attentive. He had a way of being there for Amelia that felt genuine and steady, a stark contrast to Jacob's exuberance. When Amelia mentioned her bike chain was stuck, Liam was the one who spent an hour fixing it, his hands black with grease. When she mentioned her favorite flowers, a small bouquet would appear the next day, left on the porch without a word. Liam didn't need to say much. His actions spoke for him. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, feeling like an outsider in my own home. I wasn't blind to what was happening. Both of my brothers were falling for her. It was unspoken, but the signs were everywhere. Jacob became more possessive of their conversations, always finding ways to steer them back to him. Liam, on the other hand, grew quieter, his frustration bubbling just beneath the surface. One evening, I overheard a conversation that confirmed my suspicions. I had gone to the living room to grab a book, but stopped short when I heard Liam's voice. He and Amelia were sitting on the couch, their voices low but intense. "Sometimes I feel like I can't compete with Jacob," Liam admitted, his tone heavy with emotion. "He's always been the one people notice first. Amelia hesitated, her voice soft when she replied, "It's not about competing, Liam. You're different." I didn't hear the rest of the conversation, but her words stayed with me. Different. What did she mean by that? Was it a compliment? A way of letting him down gently? The ambiguity of it gnawed at me, and I couldn't help but wonder if Liam had finally found the courage to confess his feelings. The tension between Jacob and Liam grew with each passing day. It was in the way Jacob's jokes became sharper, almost cruel, when Liam was around. It was in the way Liam avoided eye contact, his jaw clenched as he tried to stay calm. And it was in the way Amelia seemed caught in the middle, her bright smile dimming under the weight of it all. I didn't know how to fix it, and I wasn't sure I could. The dynamic between us was shifting, and for the first time, I felt like an outsider looking in, powerless to stop what was happening. The easy camaraderie we once shared was slipping away, replaced by something far more fragile and uncertain. I could feel the cracks forming, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. It all unraveled one quiet afternoon. I was in the hallway when I heard raised voices coming from the living room. I hesitated, unsure whether to step in or walk away, but curiosity won out. As I edged closer, I saw Jacob standing in front of Liam, his face flushed with anger. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" Jacob spat, his voice sharp. "Sneaking around, trying to make her fall for you? You're pathetic." Liam didn't rise to the bait immediately. He stood there, his hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight. "This isn't about you, Jacob," he said finally, his voice measured but laced with tension. "It was never about you." Jacob laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "Of course it's about me. Everything's about me, isn't it? That's why you're trying so hard to take this from me. You can't stand the thought of me having something you want." The air between them felt heavy, charged with years of unspoken rivalry and resentment. I had always thought of them as close, but in that moment, it was clear that beneath the surface, there had been cracks for a long time, cracks that Amelia's presence had only widened. "I didn't choose this," Liam shot back, his voice rising. "You think I wanted to feel this way? You think I wanted to hurt you? I didn't ask for any of it, Jacob. And yet, here we are," Jacob said coldly. Amelia's voice broke the tension. She had been standing in the doorway, her expression a mix of shock and sadness. "Stop it," she said quietly but firmly. "Both of you, stop it." They turned to her, the anger on their faces fading into something else, guilt, maybe, or regret. She looked at them, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I never wanted this. I never wanted to come between you." Jacob's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, he looked like a boy again, vulnerable and unsure. "You didn't," he said softly. "We did this to ourselves." Liam's gaze dropped to the floor, and he let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," he murmured, though it wasn't clear who he was apologizing to. Amelia took a step back, as if putting distance between herself and the chaos she had unintentionally caused. I think it's better if I leave," she said, her voice breaking. "This isn't fair to any of us." The silence that followed was deafening. Jacob didn't argue, and neither did Liam. I stood frozen, unsure of what to say or do. Amelia turned and walked away, leaving an emptiness in her wake that seemed to seep into the walls of the house. For the first time in my life, I saw my brothers not as invincible figures, but as human, flawed, hurting, and as lost as I felt. Something had broken between them, and I didn't know if it could ever be mended. All I could do was stand there, a silent witness to the fallout, wondering how we would ever move forward from this. The days after Amelia left were quiet, almost unbearably so. Jacob spent most of his time outside, working on the yard or taking long walks alone. Liam stayed in his room, the door closed more often than not. The house felt hollow, the warmth and liveliness that once defined it replaced by an oppressive silence. I tried to keep things normal, but it felt like trying to rebuild a house with broken pieces. Jacob and Liam barely spoke to each other. When they did, it was curt and distant, as though they had become strangers. It was painful to watch, knowing how close they had once been. I thought back to the nights we'd stayed up late, laughing and sharing stories, and wondered if we'd ever get back to that place. One evening, I found Liam sitting on the porch, staring out at the fading sunset. I sat down beside him, unsure of what to say. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I didn't mean for things to end up like this," he said quietly. "I didn't want to hurt him." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. There was nothing I could say that would make him feel better. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the weight of his regret pressing down on him. Jacob, too, was struggling, though he would never admit it. He had always been the strong one, the one who hid his emotions behind a confident facade. But now his smiles were forced, his laughter hollow. He was hurting just as much as Liam, and it pained me to see them both suffering in their own ways. Eventually, I realized that if things were going to change, someone had to take the first step. I couldn't stand by and watch them drift further apart. One night, I gathered my courage and approached Jacob in the kitchen. "You miss him, don't you?" I asked, keeping my tone gentle. He didn't answer at first, his hands gripping the edge of the counter. Finally, he sighed. "Of course I do. He's my brother. But how am I supposed to get past this?" I didn't have an easy answer for him, but I reminded him of all the times Liam had been there for him, of the bond they'd shared before everything went wrong. "He's still that person," I said. "And I know he feels the same way about you. You just need to talk to him." It took time, but slowly, the walls between them began to come down. Small gestures, an offer to help with a chore, a shared meal, turned into tentative conversations. It wasn't an overnight fix, but it was a start. They were rebuilding, piece by piece, and I clung to the hope that one day they would be whole again. As for Amelia, she had become a memory we all carried differently. For Jacob, she was a lesson in letting go. For Liam, she was a bittersweet reminder of love and sacrifice. And for me, she was a symbol of how fragile our bonds could be, but also how resilient we were in the face of pain. In the end, we learned that love, no matter how beautiful, is never without its cost. But through forgiveness and understanding, we began to find our way back to each other, proving that family, above all, is worth fighting for.